Hi everyone, and welcome back to Just for Kicks. It's been a busy, hot, and humid week, and maybe not one of my best ones. My AC broke down, so I had to trudge to my cousin's house in the middle of the night just to get some cool air. And honestly, while I was sweating through all of my troubles, all I could think about was what I would do to get a nice cornetto ice cream. And before anyone gets too excited, ice cream is not my answer, or maybe it is. I'm not giving away any spoilers this early. At one point, I was actually thinking, was I PMSing because of the AC troubles? Because they were making me so angry? Only to look at my period app and realizing that PMS was yet to come. So I still have that to look forward to. I had to accept that these were valid emotions and that I could not blame PMS for everything. Sometimes you just have plain bad luck. And because today we already started with an update, I thought I would switch things up this week. Let's do the achievement and the question for next week first, and then we'll get into last week's question and all the answers that came my way. My achievement this week has been basic survival. I also picked up a book to read, but I'm only 20 pages in. But on a week where I'm hanging on by a thread, I'm patting myself on the back. Now, with the question that's coming for you now this week, it came from something that happened to me a few days ago. It was a silver lining of sorts in a weird and annoying week, and it made me smilier that day, if that is even a word. I greeted someone with a smile, and they said something to me that made me realize that it was a compliment I had never received before. They said, "Thank you for being so happy," or "for bringing the happy to this place." I paraphrase. To be honest, I was so taken by that compliment that I don't remember the exact words. And I hadn't realized how much a cheerful nature can do that or how it can affect someone. But what caught me even more off guard was realizing that I hadn't even realized I was doing that. It was just something that came naturally to me. So having someone recognize it and tell me that it had a positive effect on them was really nice. So the question for everyone for next week is, what is the most unexpected compliment you have received? Something you've not received before, or just a comment so rare that you had to stop and think about it. Of course, something that was nice and made you smile. So, with that said, let's get into the answers for last week's question. I asked you guys, if you had to choose one, ice cream or cake, for the rest of your life, which one would it be? But before I dive into your answers, I thought, why not do some research into these two things which are loved by everyone? So the first question I had was, did ice cream come before cake or vice versa? But this answer was not nearly as complicated as the chicken and egg question. Ice cream came centuries before cake and wins that debate handily. The next question I had was, where did they come from and who invented them? So let's start with ice cream. I think it gets seniority since it has been around for a very long time. The earliest recorded milk-based frozen desserts date back to China during the Tang dynasty, between 618 and 907 AD. They used stored winter ice and animal milk, so we're talking about a very early ancestor of what we now call ice cream. From there, the idea slowly made its way west. It reached Italy in the early 1500s, and by the 1660s, water ices and sorbets were being served in places like Naples, Florence, Paris, and Spain. Sweetened milk ices appeared in Naples by 1664. And then, in 1843, someone invented the hand cranked ice cream machine, which made the whole process much easier and gave us the smoother texture we are familiar with today. So, yes, ice cream has history on its side. It was here first. Then I investigated the origins of cake. The first thing I learned was that it comes from an old Norse word, kaka, which first of all made me laugh because kaka in Marathi means uncle. So that was just funny. But this word is of Viking origin and dates to the 13th century. Now, what the Vikings were doing, being the ones to name it when the Egyptians were making early versions of it, thousands of years earlier than the Vikings, by the way, might be a story I'll have to delve into on my own time. The Egyptians were making early versions with honey, nuts, and dried fruits more than 4,000 years ago. The Greeks and Romans had their own versions too. Today's cake, the one all of us are familiar with, though appeared much later in the 17th century in Europe. Better ovens and refined sugar made this possible. And then, In the 19th century, baking powder changed things again and led to the literal and meteoric rise of cake. Which eventually brings us to the very serious question we're dealing with today: ice cream or cake? Let's start with the ice cream camp. The first person chose ice cream for what I thought were very practical reasons. They pointed out that they don't have a sweet tooth, which is actually the first time they and I have not related on something. I love desserts, so apparently, this is where we finally found some separation between us. Now, their argument was purely based on usage because, as I said, they don't really love desserts. Ice cream has practical applications. It helps you cool down in the summer, and apparently, it also has medicinal properties. When your stomach is upset, vanilla ice cream can come to your rescue. Now, they are no medical expert, but this is a hack I'm willing to try out. Cake, on the other hand, they felt was very much an event based food. According to them, cake has no inherent value, and we have simply created the societal pressure around having one at birthdays and celebrations. Otherwise, you could cut anything on a birthday. Now, this is also the person who opened this entire kulfi, halwa, and milk cake can of worms. They opined that kulfi is not ice cream, and if I were to say it is, then halwa or milk cake, which are Indian sweets, would be cake. I think on this week's question, we really disagreed on everything. And the kulfi khulasa, I had to step in and make an official call. Kulfi counts as ice cream, and halwa and milk cake do not count as cake. My position is entirely consistent on this and it cannot be appealed. Kulfi counts, halwa doesn't. I don't make the rules, except I literally do. Now, the second person who chose ice cream had a completely different reason. Versatility, they said. They also reminded me of one of my favorite things about food: how quickly it can take you somewhere down memory lane. They remembered having Sujata Mastani with their family every Saturday evening. They would walk to the store together every weekend and get one, and apparently, just talking about it during this conversation was enough to make them start salivating. They were also very specific about the kind of ice cream they like. Not all ice cream, apparently. Definitely not kulfi. Just the basics, they said, like vanilla and butter pecan. Which made me wonder, what exactly qualifies as basic? Because butter pecan is fancy, bro. Then there was the health angle. One more person chose ice cream because, according to them, it can always be made with fewer and cleaner ingredients and lower calories without compromising on taste. And then there was one final vote for ice cream, and the only thing they said was cassata. When I asked why and I asked them to elaborate, the answer was simply ice cream is tastier and it has more flavors. Few more words. And this is the same person who chose 16 because they wanted to study fluid mechanics all over again. So I'm beginning to understand that elaborate explanations are simply not their thing. And I respect that consistency. But enough about ice cream. Let's see what the cake camp had to say. The first person who chose cake had a sentimental reason behind their choice. They have fond memories of growing up baking cakes in their old oven, and they still bake them today. Plus, they had a bunch of memories with the dish, and I think that is what makes this question so heartwarming. Sometimes you're not really choosing the food, you're choosing everything that comes with it. Now, I chose cake too. I'm a relatively recent convert though. Since moving to a colder climate, I find myself baking more and I have developed a particular appreciation for a nice lemon cake. And I may also be homesick because this question made me think of a hazelnut chocolate cake from a certain baker back home, or an in season Alfonso mango cake from that same baker. Both so delicious. But if it wasn't for my newfound appreciation for cake, and if I were in India right now, I would probably be getting mango ice cream or chocolate chip ice cream from Naturals. So, do I actually know what my answer is? Maybe not. But for the purposes of this podcast, and because I'm in Canada, my answer is cake. Now, someone else had a very emphatic vote for cake. They texted me saying cake 1,000,000%. They also introduced a satiety metric and said it was an all season delight. Now, their sibling came with another stronger argument. This person reiterated the point that cake is not restricted by the weather, but what really caught my attention was the additional argument about texture. Apparently, cakes are much more interesting texturally than ice cream. And then came what I thought was a pretty clever argument. Have you ever heard of ice cream cake? Of course. But have you ever heard of cake ice cream? No. Because apparently, whenever we want to make ice cream more interesting, we end up putting bits of cake into it. The cookie doughs and the chocolate brownie pieces. Now, I'm not saying this proves anything, but it is a pretty strong case for cake. Then there was one person who chose cake and gave me absolutely no reason. They just said cake, and I respect that confidence. Then there were two more votes for cake, and I'm grouping these together for a very important reason. They are friends who are great bakers and have invited me over when they both baked some delicious cakes. Now, the first one had something to say about ice cream. They said that it came with childhood conditioning. Growing up, ice cream apparently came with the threat of a cold or a cough, so it was really treated as a summer only food. Ice cream wasn't encouraged during the monsoons or winter, and even now, this person says they need to be in the mood for it. Cake, though, is a different story. They are not really a sweet tooth, so it's surprising that they always say yes when there is cake present. They also said it is something they've enjoyed since they were a kid. And I have to add a personal note here because I know this person very well. I have never liked cooked orange in anything. Just give me the fruit, I will peel it and eat it. I mean, I've returned a pastry at a cafe because they said it didn't have orange, but it did. But this person changed my opinion. They made the best orange cake I have ever eaten in my life. So I see where they're coming from with this argument about cake. Now, the other person told me a story from their childhood when they used to go to Iyengar Bakery on Sunday mornings to get rava cake. For them, it was pure nostalgia. They also emphasized that they love cake. Their face started gleaming with joy when they told me why. They said it's an all season dessert, they can have it regardless of their mood, and while they have gone through their own phases with ice cream, cake has been a constant. And talking to them also reminded me that they make one of the best chocolate cakes I've ever eaten in my life. So I may be slightly biased, but I think I have very good reasons for being on Team Cake right now. So where does that leave us? Now, I didn't go into this thinking I would address it as a debate. I didn't do that during Pizza versus Burger Week, but today the moderator in me insists on making an appearance, so here we are. Ice cream made a pretty strong case for itself: practicality, nostalgia, versatility, and health. But cake came back stronger. Nostalgia, versatility, satiety, texture, the ability to make me eat cooked orange, and a whopping 7 people vouching for it. Yeah, cake won this round. I really thought ice cream would win this round, but every week I learn something new. Now, let me say this. The fairest conclusion is that your choice is valid. Whatever you chose wins for you. For me, I think they both win on nostalgia and versatility. Ice cream can be that cornetto you make sure to have on a trip back home, or a coconut, hazelnut, chiku, or a fig and raisin flavor, or whatever flavor floats your boat that week. Cake can be that chocolate pastry from Monjani's in Pune that you walked to get as a kid because you loved it. What I would give to have something like that to look forward to next week when I'm PMSing, I can't even tell you. Either way, a big thank you from this sweet tooth to the makers. I appreciate you. And now, before I conclude, let me remind you of next week's question again. What is the most unexpected compliment you have ever received? Something you hadn't heard before, or just a comment so rare that you had to stop and think about it. Send me your answers before next Wednesday. I would love to hear what has stuck with you. All this talk has made me want to go get some dessert, so I'm off. But before I do that, thank you to everyone who sent in an answer this week. I didn't think I would get this much passion around ice cream and cake, but 12 weeks in, I should know better. Thanks for listening and keeping me busy. I'm looking forward to hearing all the unexpected compliments you have received. Take care and bye-bye.